right, let's pray and ask God to help us learn how to deal with each other. Jesus, thank you for this night. I thank you for these amazing men and women. I pray that you give them lots of energy tonight, Lord, to just engage and to have fun in this class tonight, Lord. Bless our time, bless our content, we pray in your name. Amen. Someone once asked John D. Rockefeller, hopefully you know that name, someone asked Rockefeller what the number one skill was that he looked for in people that worked for him. And this was his statement. He said, the ability to get along with people is one of the most valuable skills that an employee can have. So I just take a moment here and just kind of just get a picture in your head of somebody that you've interacted with in the past or maybe presently that's really difficult. And I'm sure that everybody can come up with at least one face or multiple faces. Right? We've all met those people, right? We've all met difficult people. I'll never forget the day I was at one of the churches I was at, not where I'm at now. I'll never forget the day, the church I was at, where someone called me and scheduled an appointment with me. It was at the church. It was my dad's church. I was working for my dad. Someone called and scheduled an appointment with me. And the only reason that they wanted to talk to me was just simply to tell me that they thought I was a loser, and that the only reason that I had a job was because my dad was the pastor there at the church, and that I didn't even deserve to have a job at any church, let alone this church. Not a very nice conversation. Difficult person, right? I've been in youth ministry for a long time, worked with tons and tons and tons of difficult teenagers, difficult parents, I mean, you name it, like the whole spectrum of all of them. I've had youth leaders that have called me to rip me to shreds and tell me, I mean, it happens. It's just life. And so I thought this was a relevant topic for this class because you're going to deal with difficult people. You're going to deal with students that are going to have attitudes and they're going to be difficult. You're going to deal with parents that are going to be really, really difficult to work with. Sometimes you're going to find yourself in a church situation on staff somewhere, and it's going to be a difficult situation. You're just going to deal with a lot of it. And so I just thought that this would be a really relevant topic just to talk through some of these things. And some of this stuff might be repeat for some of the different things that you've been exposed to educationally, and some of it might fill in some gaps for you. Some of it might be brand new. At the end of the day, though, the most helpful part of what we're going to do tonight is what we're going to do with our guest. And so I think some of you probably have some breakaway stuff that you have to go to, which is unfortunate that you got to miss, because it's probably going to be one of the highlight guests that we're going to have the whole semester. But there's going to be some really good stuff that we're going to talk about. So how should we handle criticism as a leader? Because criticism is one of the difficult things that we deal with as a leader. So I'm going to just kind of take some stuff from the life of Jesus for this part, because Jesus had to deal with a lot of really difficult people. So if you're filling in the blanks, it's the first section. How should we handle criticism as a leader? Number one, realize that you can't please everybody. And that's easy to say. It's almost trite. It's almost like, well, you can't please everybody, you know. Do you really believe that? Some people do, and some people don't. Some people aren't really sure. Some people say they believe it, but they don't really internalize that belief. How many of you would call yourself naturally, you kind of would put yourself in the camp of being a people pleaser? You like to make people happy. Anybody? Right. So about half the class, right? If not more. People that are people pleasers, this is a hard truth for them to really internalize and live out, because the way that you're wired, your personality, your God-given, personality, who you are, how God made you, you created in such a way that you take great joy in making other people happy. You take security in making other people happy. It's like a part of your DNA. It's a part of who you are. It's like sometimes it becomes a part of your self-esteem. And when other people aren't happy with you, like life just kind of like gets frozen. You kind of get paralyzed in that moment, because it's like someone's not happy. Mom or dad's not happy. A friend's not happy. A leader. This situation. And so if you're kind of wired to be a people pleaser, there's something inside of you that wants to freeze and stop as a leader and fix everything around you until all is at peace in your world before you move on. And one of the things you have to learn, and you can learn it from the life of Jesus, is that you won't make everybody happy. Jesus didn't even make everybody happy. There will be people that just for whatever reason, not going to like you. John chapter 5, verse 30 says this. This is Jesus speaking. He says, by myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just. For I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me. So here's Jesus in this statement saying, listen, I'm not trying to make you happy. I'm trying to make him happy. I'm trying to make God happy. And so at the end of the day, in order to really internalize this truth, and you say, okay, I got to realize that I can't please like everybody. I have to realize that I can't make you happy. That doesn't mean I'm going to be belligerent to you. That doesn't mean I'm going to be disrespectful to you. It doesn't mean I'm going to be like, well, sorry, can't make you happy, and turn around and walk away, and treat someone in that sort of fashion. But it does mean that deep down inside, I can still lay my head down on the pillow at night, and I can still go to sleep, and I can still know, you know what? I'm making God happy. I'm pleasing God, and I can't make everyone else happy, but I'm doing my very best, with what God has given me to please him. And there's just going to be some people that aren't going to be happy with me. I mean, at the end of the day, even God can't make everybody happy, right? One person wants rain and the other person wants sunshine. They're all praying to the same God, but it's like everyone wants something different. So you have to really internalize this truth. When you're dealing with criticism, you have to internalize this truth of, I might not be able to make you happy. Some of you might be wired like me. I don't know why I believe this. I do. And I know it's in my head, I know that this is not true. But in my heart, I always believe that if somebody doesn't like me, or if someone disagrees with me, that if me and that person just sit and talk long enough, eventually they'll be happy. Anyone else believe that? Am I the only one? You're kind of nodding your head. Do you kind of believe that? I don't know why I just think that way. I just think if they just got to know me, they would really like me. Sometimes they got to know me and they like me even less. And when we disagree about something, I just think, well, if we just talk a little bit longer about it, then eventually they're gonna we're gonna come to an agreement. And guess what? It doesn't always work. And so as a leader, you got to back away sometimes and just say, you know what? We're gonna have to agree to disagree. I'm not gonna make you happy. I can't please you. Holden.
One of my favorite quotes I've ever heard comes from my boss. He says, not everybody can be happy on the same day. I love that. It's so
True. Number 2, refuse to play their game. Again, talking about the critics. How do we handle criticism as a leader? Refuse to play their game. Here's again, taking this section from the life of Christ. Matthew 22, verse 18 said, Jesus said, knowing their evil intent, he's speaking about the Pharisees in this situation. Jesus said, knowing their evil intent, he said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? And so here's Jesus. He dealt with difficult people. He dealt with people that were religious, that were fanatics, that were legalistic, that were hypocrites. And he dealt with the fact that not only did they not like him, but they continually tried to trap him. They continually tried to make his life miserable. Now, that's like the lady that I dealt with in that church in Pittsburgh. It wasn't that she just was like, we had a run-in, I made a decision, she didn't like it, now she was mad at me, and now it's kind of awkward, and we don't really talk anymore. No, this is like blatant, I don't like you, I'm gonna make your life miserable, I'm gonna try to trap you, I'm gonna try to say, it's just like, I'm gonna make things as bad for you as they possibly can be. Guess what? You're gonna meet people like that. You're going to have people in your youth group like that. You're going to have people in your church like that. You're going to have people in your job, places where you work right now. You're going to have people that their only interest is to see your demise, and so they set up traps. And you have to just decide, you know what, I'm not even going to play that game. I don't have time to play that game. So here's kind of the motto that I've always tried to live by, and this is not always easy, but it's just real simple. It's just truth and grace, okay? And truth in a relationship with a difficult person, not just difficult person, but in any relationship, truth says this. Truth says, I'm always going to be honest with you. It's just all there is to it. I'm always going to be honest with you. Grace says, I'm always going to love you. Now you got to have the perfect balance between those two worlds in every relationship, because some of us are we're just all truth, right? I just say it how it is. I mean, anybody like that is like, I just tell them, I don't care. It just comes out, and that's just the way that it is. And we take like great pride. We almost like, in a bad sense, we take great pride because we're just like, I just throw it down. I just lay it out. It doesn't matter. And that's not good. That's not good. And then on the flip side, there's like the person that are like, I just love them, and I love them too much to be honest with them, and I love them too much to really tell them the truth, and I love them too much to kind of. the balance there is what we have to find, especially as leaders of other people, especially as leaders of volunteers in a ministry setting, especially of parents and kids in the youth group, all that kind of stuff. You got to find that balance of, I'm going to be honest with you no matter what, but I'm also going to love you no matter what. And you're going to equally feel both sides of that from me. Now, in my life, I've often made the mistake of being too far on the truth side. I'm just telling the truth, you know. We're going to talk about personalities a lot in the class tonight. So I have a dominant personality. I'm a high D. And so I can just be just here, boom, truth, just right to the point, just cut to it, ching, 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 ching. It's just the way that it is. So for me, I gotta balance that other side out, and I have to say, okay, I gotta make sure that this person that I'm talking to, that they feel my sincerity, that they feel the fact that I really love them, that I care about them, or that I care about their kid, or whatever the situation is, because it's really easy for me to have real short, quick, abrupt conversations and walk away and say to myself, well, I told them the truth. As if that's the greatest virtue in life, is that you can be honest with somebody, right? So, truth and grace. Number 3. Never retaliate. Never retaliate. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38, 39, Jesus says this, you have heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person, for if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek as well. You're going to be baited into situations. You're going to be tempted. You're going to have people that sometimes are going to talk behind your back. You're going to have people that are going to cause problems for you. It's going to be a great temptation for you to retaliate in some way, shape, or form. Now, you can look at something like that and think, I just can't even imagine like that kind of scenario happening. But it does. It happens every day in ministry world. It happens every day in church world, where it's like, oh, you said that? Oh, I'm going to say this. Oh, you think this? Okay, I'm going to come back with this. And so you have to choose when you're dealing with a difficult parent who's being disrespectful, who's talking down to you or whatever. Especially, let me just be honest with you, it's a little harder when you first start out because of your age. So here you are now, you're pastor so-and-so at a church. You're 23, 24 years old, and you got kids in your youth group, and guess what age their parents are? 40, 41, 42. I mean, they're like almost twice your age. And so for them to like respect you as the leader, when they look at you and they think you're like the age of my kid, right? And I've got to like listen to you. It's really, really easy to put yourself in like this ultra defensive, retaliatory position whenever you're dealing with a difficult person. This is what you have to tell yourself. You have to tell yourself, I'm not going to lower myself to your level. I sat in a board meeting long, long time ago, and at the time I was this is a church in Pittsburgh. I was the pastor of evangelism and discipleship. And so I was bringing this presentation to the board of deacons at the church, and it was basically like this evangelism strategy that I wanted to see us put in place in our church. And at that church, they had a midweek service on Tuesday nights. That was just when they did it for years. And so I had come up with this whole plan where instead of people coming to church and sitting in a pew on Tuesday night and listening to one more Bible story, one more sermon, they've already heard one on Sunday morning that week, and they've already heard one on Sunday night. You know, that church had church on Sunday night. They've already heard all these different things. Instead of all that, let's go out and do something. We were an inner city church, so the urban environment all around us. I was like, let's go out. Let's go be the light. Let's go be the gospel. And so I was casting vision that we would take our midweek service and we would turn it into a night where everybody who comes to church would be involved with some sort of community outreach. You know, we'd go do something. We'd go door to door, or we'd go hand out free bottles of water, or we'd go do some sort of community service project, clean up a neighborhood or whatever. Just kind of get out of the church, right? And man, I'm just thinking like this is like basic. This is like as simple could be. And part of my strategy for like gaining momentum with this whole thing was that I wanted the deacon board, those men that were on the deacon board in that church, it was all men. I wanted them to help lead the way. And so I was asking each one of them to commit, because, oh, by the way, none of them actually came to church on Tuesday nights. They were just the deacons in the church. And I wanted them to commit to come to church on Tuesday nights once a month. I felt like that was a pretty reasonable commitment. You can still have your other 3 off, you know, but I want, you know, once a month, all the ministry leaders to come, you know, at least one time, and then they would lead teams of people to go out. Well, like, they ticked. I mean, they were so mad. I was shocked I'm sitting there, like, they are just like, this is terrible. This is the worst idea I've ever heard. I can't believe you think that people are going to go out and actually do this. This is ridiculous. None of us have the time to do this, blah, 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 blah. And so this one guy, this one deacon, turned the whole thing around and started yelling at me. Why are you trying to get me to do your job? Isn't this what we pay you to do? You're the pastor of evangelism and discipleship. You go out and knock on the doors. You go out and clean up the streets from trash. You go out and hand out the bottles of water. This isn't the board meeting. My dad's like sitting right there, the whole thing. And of course, he's like now in this ultimate awkward position because he's like, he wants to like defend his son and everything. But he's kind of like, I can't really do that. So he's being quiet. So it's like me versus the world in this situation. And I just remember thinking like, this was not how I expected this to go. Like I thought I was bringing like this wonderful plan and vision to the table. We're going to grow this church. We're going to reach people for Christ. This is going to be amazing. And all it was met with was kind of what Jesus dealt with: religious hypocrisy, the whole deal. And so in that moment, I remember sitting there saying to myself, "Don't retaliate. Don't retaliate. Don't raise your voice. Stay calm. Stay calm. Stay calm." You're going to have those kinds of moments. I guarantee it. You're going to have those kinds of moments as leaders, whether it's in a church world or whether it's in a secular world, where someone's jumping down your throat, and here's what you get to choose. You get to be just like them and yell and scream and holler and insult and call names and feel good about yourself for just a little bit, or you get to choose the high road. You get to choose the same road that Jesus chose. And you get to say, you know what? I'm not going to retaliate. Number 4, pray for them. Now, that's another one that's kind of like, oh, that sounds good, Pastor Aaron. That's great. Pray for him. Oh, Jesus, help him out. Matthew chapter 5, verse 44 says this, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Do you know why Jesus gives us enemies? Do you know why Jesus lets us be persecuted? I'm sure there's multiple answers to it, but the thing that I think about is if you and I don't have enemies, then we never really find out what it means to love people. If you only love people that love you back, I'm not exactly sure that's really the depth of Christ's love. Like if you've only ever really learned how to like people that are like you or that like you, is that really love? I think God intentionally allows us to interface with people that, and we don't really in the church world use like when a parent's mad at us, we're not like, oh, they're my enemy. We don't use, but in Bible days, David like prayed hellfire and brimstone on his enemies. He's like, God, kill them, curse them all. But think about it. Just think about it in a real logical way. Why does God allow you to have enemies? Why does God allow you to go through persecution? Why does he allow some of your persecution to come from the very people who are supposed to support you in the church world, the parents of the youth ministry and then the deacons of the church? Why? Well, maybe there's a great, great, great lesson for you and I to learn about leadership or about love or about what it really means to pray for people. So when I say pray for them, I'm not saying pray against them. I'm not saying pray mean on them. Right? I'm not saying pray for their demise. I'm saying pray for them. Pray that God blesses them. Pray that God gives them favor. Pray that God gives them a raise in their job. Pray that God blesses their family. Pray that God helps them reach and achieve their wildest dreams. Can you pray that way for someone who's your enemy? See, that's totally different because normally when we think about praying for your enemies, we're just like, oh God, we don't really pray for our enemies. We pray for us to deal with our enemies. Because this is usually how our prayers sound. Oh, God, help me. God, help me deal with that person. God, help me know what to say to them. Oh, God, help them. And this is what we really mean. Oh, God, help them to agree with me. Oh, God, help them to realize that I'm really right and they're so wrong in this situation. That's what we're really praying. Come on, let's be real about it. But that's not what Jesus told us to do. I think he's saying, listen, pray blessing from heaven on them. Don't pray for curses on them. Pray for the rain of blessing to fall on that family, on that life. Pray that for them. Take care of them in that way. And so you want to really learn how to love people and how to deal with critical people. Learn how to really intercede for them. Learn how to really pray for them. That lady that I talked about who was really mean and hurt me a lot in that church situation. I left the church. And probably like 8 or 9 years after I left the church, all of a sudden I got a card in the mail from her with her name on it. And it kind of scared me when I saw it. I was like, oh, gosh. What the, like she's still coming after me. Okay, here we go. And, and she wrote me this card and she was just like, God has worked on my life and I realized that I never asked you to forgive me for how poorly I treated you when you were here. Only God can do that. There's no words that I could have ever said that could bring her to that place. And that's what you have to understand when you pray for your enemies. What you're really doing is you're basically saying, listen, God, me and all my abilities, me and all my thoughts, me and whatever I communicate is never going to make it work with that other person. You're the only one who's going to be able to fix this. You're the only one who's going to be able to do in their heart what needs to be done in their heart, and in my heart what needs to be done in my heart. So that's why I'm praying for that person and I'm praying for that situation. You work it out. You're the only one that can do that. Number 5, take a look inside. And this one, depending again on your personality type, this one can be really hard. This one's hard for me because, again, being like the high D dominant personality, it's really hard for people like us to admit that we're wrong. Because we don't think that we're wrong. It's hard for us to even imagine that we were actually wrong. Like the thought that I could have made a mistake is really difficult for me to think of. And I'm sure my wife could talk about that for a long, long time. But if you find yourself in ministry after a couple years or a year or so at a church or whatever, and I hope that you remember this, but if you find yourself in ministry one day and it seems like everywhere you turn, there's another critic, and there's another controversy, and there's another person who's upset with you, and there's whatever it is, there's a really good chance that it's not just that everyone around you has issues. There's a really good chance that maybe there's a problem with you too. And depending on your personality type, it can be really hard sometimes for us to admit that or to see that or to back away enough and say, okay, wait a second. This same pattern keeps happening in all of my relationships. So let me just make it real practical. Youth pastor, new person wants to get involved, they're a volunteer, you get them on your youth team, it's great, they're on your team for 2 or 3 months, all of a sudden they're kind of upset about something, you try to work it out, it doesn't really work out, they leave. That pattern replays itself over 2, 3, 4 times, all different people, different situations, different circumstances, but it just seems like it keeps happening. Every time you get a new leader, then they're gone, like in a half a year. And you're frustrated and you feel like, what's wrong with everyone in this church? What is everyone's problem here? Why do all these people act this way? And we start to say stuff and we justify, well, this church has got issues. This church got problems. This church has got like spiritual, demonic, weird things going on. Like, we just pull it all down, whatever trump card we can think of. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's our whatever, something about, and so sometimes when you feel like, man, people are always critical all the time, that I'd have to just take a look inside, Here's the thing that you got to think about. Many of the criticisms that people will lay at your feet or my feet might not be done in the right way, might not be done in the right spirit, might have some meanness to them or some cruelty in them and things like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of the criticisms that you and I receive have a little spark of truth in them, don't they? At least a little bit. Now here's what you and I do, and this is the mistake that we all make. We take, and I do this all the time. It's just the way that I'm wired, and I always have to back away. I have to tell myself to back away from this. Someone could be saying something to me that I know in my head is absolutely 100% right, but I don't like the way they said it. I don't like their approach. I didn't like the way they delivered the message. And so because I don't like the way they deliver the message, not only do I refuse to receive the message, but then an argument ensues about how they should have said it differently, or how they hurt me, or how they offended me, or all these different things. When at the end of the day, what they were trying to say really had some truth to it. This is where, as leaders, as a wise leader, as a mature leader, and that wisdom and maturity that has nothing to do with your chronological age, it has everything to do with how you've allowed yourself to be developed in a setting like this, or allowed yourself to spiritually grow up, in your lifetime. A mature person just steps back and says, I gotta take a look at this because there's some truth to that. Forget about how rude they were. Forget about how they gossip behind my back. Forget about how they spread it around. They should have never talked to anyone else. Is it true? Because if there's truth to it, then I need to deal with the truth. And if I deal with the truth first, it'll give me the opportunity to come back and coach the leader later about their approach. I have one of my best youth leaders that I have right now. He's a small group leader for my 11th grade guys. This is his third year in ministry with us. He started with this group as 9th graders, and he's made a commitment to see them all the way through to graduation. A couple years ago, I was getting into our pre-service meeting late. This is at the church I'm at now. We have a little pre-service meeting before our 11 o'clock service on Sunday mornings, the youth service, and it starts at like 10:45, 10:40, whatever. I was getting in there later, whatever, like that. And I got in, and when I walked into the meeting, this leader of mine is yelling at the top of his lungs at all of our leaders. And he's directing it towards the person who's leading the meeting, who was one of my staff members at the time. This person is crying because it's like so emotional. And he's basically just going on a rampage about everything that's wrong with our ministry. Awkward. I just walked into the whole situation, and everything inside of me, the dominant and the high D inside of me, wants to just be like, shut up! You're wrong. This is improper. This is incorrect. Don't ever talk to our, just like kind of just lay into him, because I don't like the approach. But it's kind of weird. I'm walking into it. I wasn't the one leading the meeting, all this stuff and everything like that. Long story short, because I can tell the longer version, I would just shorten it down here. Everything that he said was true. Everything he was upset about as one of our volunteers, when we talked about it afterwards, when we sat down and evaluated afterwards, it was all true. Every single piece of it. The way he did it, not cool. Damaged some relationships. Not a good deal at all. Totally immature on his part. Should have called for a private meeting. Should have never been talking about it in front of all the leaders. But it was all true. And so I just had to choose to say, here you go, truth and grace moment. Here it is. I need to tell this guy the truth. At some point, I need to say to him, listen, you can't do that again. That's inappropriate. You can never do that again. And I need to know that you're willing to make that commitment. But on the grace side, on the love side, I need to be able to be honest enough with him and humble enough to say to him, but just, you were right. And so my approach toward him was, we got together, we sat down and talked, and our almost entire conversation wasn't about his approach, but it was about the content. And I just said, you know what, you're right. Everything you're saying is right. Once we got through all of that, it was a lot easier for me to then say, can we talk about how I went down? Yeah, we can. And before I even said a word to him to correct him in that situation, he said to me, I'm so embarrassed. I thought that you wanted to meet with me because you wanted to kick me out of the ministry. Because I knew that I totally screwed up. So how you deal with criticism as a leader and how you internalize it and how you kind of process through it can say a lot. I could have lost a really, really great volunteer in that situation. He's like my right-hand man right now. I'm getting ready to put him in charge of all of my small groups, and he's going to be the coach for all my small group leaders. Right? And so it's all how you deal with those situations, and it's really easy to overreact, and it's really easy to just kind of shoot the messenger or the way that it comes out. But sometimes we have to, number 5, we have to take a look inside. Number 6, understand that leadership will always be criticized. Criticize Jesus, they're going to do the same to you. If you hate criticism, if you hate being criticized, if everything inside of you freezes up and you're just like, I can't handle it, I can't handle criticism, I don't want it, I don't want anyone to critique me, I don't want anyone to evaluate me, I don't want anyone to tell me when I'm doing anything wrong, here's the solution for you. Ready? Don't ever do anything. Like anything. Like end life soon. I did not just say commit suicide. I just said here's I kind of sorry. Cut video edit. It's on my so no, you're going to be criticized. You're absolutely going to be criticized. That's just life. That's just the way that it is. So if you hate criticism, never lead. Don't take a position anywhere, whether it's paid or unpaid. Because there will be people that will criticize you. And so you just need to understand that. And here's what you can do to remind yourself and make you feel really, really good whenever you feel like you're being overly criticized for stuff. Just tell yourself, I'm really becoming like Jesus. I must be really a lot like Jesus. Not because I'm perfect, but because he was criticized too. And so you need to take like great refuge in that fact that if the Son of God himself received major criticism in the Word of God, you're going to receive it too, especially in a ministry setting. It's just going to happen. Last point here under this section here. Number 7. This is a tough one. And depending on how you're wired and what your personality is, this is a really tough one. Refuse to take everything personally. Refuse to take everything personally. How many of you take it personal when you get criticized? Just be honest. Just be real. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard not to sometimes. And again, especially when we do this whole personality thing in a second, you know, you're going to learn more about it. But it's hard depending on your personality and your profile and how you're wired. It's really hard to be the person who says, I'm going to choose not to take this personal. That's just really difficult. I heard someone say it once, and I forget who it was, but not like incredibly profound, but I just always remembered it. But they always just said this. They said, when you're being criticized, never take it personal. Always take it serious. Never take it personal. Always take it serious. And here's the balance to that. And again, we talk about truth and grace and balancing that. If sometimes in our attempt to not take it personal, we try to dismiss all of the truth of what's being said. So you have to take it serious enough to figure out, is there truth to it? Is it something I need to work on? Is it an area of development for me? Is it an area of weakness in my life? But not taking it personal is I can't let it get to my heart. I can't let it be like a wound in my soul or in my spirit that sticks there and it affects, you know, the way that I am. And so, you know, one of our pastors on staff, he always just says, you know, in ministry you have to have a soft heart and you have to have tough skin, because you're going to get shot at and you're going to get arrows and you're going to get criticized and all those things are going to happen to you. But if you let that stuff go straight to your heart, then what happens is you get bitter. And any leader who ends up getting bitter, especially in moments of criticism, which we're all going to have, ends up failing in ministry or never achieving their full effectiveness of who they can become and what they can do. So never take it personal. Always take it serious. So here we go. Tips, and we'll kind of fly through these here. Tips for dealing with difficult people. Learn to forgive. Sounds kind of trite, but ask yourself what Jesus would do in the situation. Ask yourself, what is it about this situation or the person that I can seek to understand and forgive? Forgiveness and us offering it is sometimes one of the most painful things that we can do, but it's also one of the most freeing things that we can do. One of my favorite quotes, and I preach this to my kids all the time, unforgiveness, bitterness is like drinking poison while waiting for the other person to die. You're not forgiving the other person for their benefit. Most of the people that you need to forgive don't even know that they need to be forgiven by you. You're forgiving them for your own benefit. So learn to forgive. Number 2, just a tip, wait it out. Walk away from it. Allow yourself to cool down. And allow yourself to just kind of like sit and think about it before you choose to respond, or you might choose not to respond at all. You know, sometimes you wait it out. Sometimes you write it out. You just sit down and you write it all out, and then it's an email that you never send, or it's something that you edit. But you know, sometimes you just got to take time. You know, you just got to pull away from it. I got to think about it. I got to process it. And sometimes in the heat of criticism, and this is something that's been really helpful for me, because again, because of my personality profile, I can jump right into the fight real easy, and I can typically think pretty quick. You know, I'm usually pretty quick with my thoughts, and I can be very lawyer-like in a conversation or in a meeting where it's just like boom, 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 and just go, and the argument, and it's like my wife says to me, she's like, you never met an argument that you didn't want to win, you know, like. And so it's just real easy for me. And so sometimes you don't have to nod your head so like strong when I say that. Like, oh, you the same way? Okay, good. I was like, you don't even know me that. No, you were. Sometimes I literally have to force myself in the midst of those kinds of conversations to say to the person who I'm dealing with, I'm going to need some time to process this, you know? And it's just, all I'm really doing is giving myself a time to cool down. I already know what I want to say to him, right? I mean, it's probably not the right thing, but in that moment, I know what I want to say. In that moment, I know that I'm right, or at least I think that I'm right? And sometimes me just saying, I'm going to need some time to think about it. I'm going to need some time to process it. It's more for my benefit so that when I do choose to respond, if respond at all, I know that I'm doing it in the right way. Number 3, ask yourself this question. Does it really matter if I'm right? Does it really matter if I'm right? All right? And again, this one's good for me. Why? Because I love to win arguments. Like, I just do. You probably do too, don't you? Yep, I'm guilty, right? I love to win arguments, right? And that, and I've had just to again learn to back away and just say, does it really matter? Like, what does it matter if I'm right? What if I am right? Do I win or do we both lose in the situation? How does it affect the relationship at the end of the day? I get to walk away and I get to say, I was right. Told you I was right. I knew I was right. What good did that do for the relationship? This is a priority question. This is asking yourself, what's most important? Now, here's what you got to think about in a church context, in a leadership context. When you're dealing with difficult people, you're dealing with parents that are being critical or just different things like that, the relationship is always the higher value. The relationship always is the higher value. I have to find some way to maintain relationship with this person, even if at the end of the day we're going to disagree. What about the relationship? Great, I was right, but now we've both lost, or I've lost out in the situation. So ask yourself that. My dad used to always say to me all the time, you got to pick and choose your battles. Is this a battle that you want to pick? Right? Is this a battle? Is it worth it? Is you getting into the fray in the situation worth it? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you got to be smart enough to say, you know what, it's not even worth it. It's better for me to lose in this situation. Here's a good question to ask yourself too. Why do you need to be right? Why? Why do you need to be right? Why do I need to be right? And see, sometimes when you start to think about your conflicts with other people and you start to ask yourself some questions in that context, this is what you discover. You discover that sometimes your need to be right is more born out of your insecurities as a person than it is, I have to be right so that I can lead or so that I can make the right decision, right? And that's what I've discovered about myself sometimes is like, man, I feel bad about myself if I'm not right or if I feel like I didn't win the argument. Pull back, ask yourself, does it really matter if I'm right? Number 4, respond slowly. Respond slowly. Sometimes when you're dealing with somebody who's a really difficult person, sometimes you get into that situation where you feel like they're kind of pushing your buttons because they kind of know you, or they know enough about you to kind of know like where your sensitive spots are, your soft spots are, and where they can kind of goad you and kind of whatever. And here's what I've realized about some people, and it's unfortunate because again, in a church world, we don't always think that these kind of things happen, but they do. And so sometimes you got to be smart enough to realize, man, this person's like on intentionally coming after me. They're kind of intentionally kind of like pushing some stuff to like get a response out of me. It goes back to what we talked about in the first session, where you have to choose to say, I'm not going to play their game, right? I'm not going to give into that. And so they're trying to trigger some sort of response from you, and when you react, you're giving them exactly what they want. And now topic doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is, oh, Pastor so-and-so, did you hear how they talked to me, or how they raised their voice at me, or how they got so upset at me, or they said this or they said that. I was in a situation a couple years ago, and it was a person on my team at church, and we had this situation where it won't make sense unless I give you the details. We were away on a trip, and one of my staff members was responsible for all the meal money for all the students on our trip. And at this point in the week, there was still several $1,000s in the bag. So it's a lot of money, and it was all of our meal money for the whole trip. And we were in a hotel. We were having this pizza party with all the students, and everyone cleaned up and left, and they accidentally left the bag sit there in the room. And one of my other staff members found it, and they decided that it was time for that person to learn a lesson, and so they just left it lay there. And their whole thought was, if it gets stolen, it gets stolen, and maybe that person will finally learn their lesson at that point. Well, long story short, the whole truth comes out, and now the trip is over. The bag never got stolen, but anyways, the truth comes out. We're back at church. We're debriefing. All this whole thing comes out in this very, very volatile, emotional meeting where this person, the person who was kind of being very spiteful and vindictive and saying they'll learn a lesson this way, they were, talking about everything like that. And at one point, and I always told you in this class it's going to be really transparent. And so, I try to show my weaknesses, just so you guys can learn from my mistakes. Hopefully you learn vicariously through some of my mistakes. But at one point in the meeting, I yelled at this person because I was mad. And it wasn't long, and what I said, like the words that I said weren't like wrong. It was just a very heated, like, I don't even remember exactly what I said. And the moment that those words came out of my mouth with the tone and volume that they came out of my mouth, I immediately said to myself, big mistake. And I realized in that moment, this whole meeting has changed now, and now nothing else that we talked about is the focus. Now the focus is the way that I just treated this person on my team. And like I've always thought back to it, it's one of those moments where the words are coming out and you're like, as they're coming out, you're thinking, oh no, bring them back. It took me years to repair that relationship with that person. Not because the words I said were so mean or cutting, because of the way that I said it, because I didn't respond slowly. And so again, that's where us as leaders, we got to see where our weaknesses are at. We got to figure out who we are. We got to figure out who we're talking to. That's what we're going to talk about in this next session here. And we got to be ready to respond in the right way. And the biggest benefit or skill you could ever learn as a leader when you're dealing with difficult people is to allow yourself emotionally to slow down enough on the inside so that you can either say to the person, I'm not ready to talk about this, or that you can clearly and calmly talk through things so that you're not like doing damage control all the time because I said this or I yelled and I said it this way, right? Let's move on here. A couple more. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about it. This is the thing that every one of us do when we're dealing with a difficult person. We deal with the situation, and then what do? We talk about it to someone else, right? This is a major, and just being real with you again, this is a major growth point in my life. And that is to deal with the situation with the people it needs to be dealt with and then just walk away. It's done. It's over with. I don't need to talk to anyone else about it. I don't need to talk to another parent about it. I don't need to talk to another youth leader about it. I don't need to talk to another staff member about it. Maybe I talk with my wife about it just because, she's my spouse and always a balancing, has a balancing, calming effect on my life. But this is the mistake that most of us make. And this is what we say. I'm just venting. Right? And we're not really venting. Actually, what we're doing is like getting ourselves even more upset about it, in the process. And so as a leader, you have to learn how to be mature enough when dealing with your criticism to simply say, you know what, I've dealt with it. I don't need to talk to anyone else about it. I don't need to have one more conversation about it. I don't need to pick up the phone and talk to one more friend about it, especially if it's somebody who's not helping you, especially if it's somebody who's kind of feeding into your fire. And so you just have to make that choice. You have to make that decision. The temptation is always going to be there to do that. But you have to make that decision to say, I'm done. I'm not talking about it anymore. Number 6, be in their shoes. How do you deal with difficult people? Put yourself in their shoes. Try to see the situation from their perspective. Try to back away from it enough. Back away from it intellectually. Back away from it emotionally where you can look at it or try to look at it the way that they're looking at it. Ask yourself, why are they acting this way? Or why are they upset in this situation? And what is the thing that is making them upset? When you're dealing with students and you're dealing with parents, when I was young as a youth pastor and all of my kids were like elementary age kids, sometimes it was really hard for me to understand why a parent of a teenager was upset about something because I just didn't see it from their perspective. Now that I'm a little older and I have one of my own kids in the youth group, now it's like, oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that totally makes sense. No problem at all. I had an intern, it was a guy from Valley Forge who was interning with me years and years and years ago. He decided it would be really fun to race the church van home versus one of the other church vans. One of the other church van was being driven by a parent of a student in the youth ministry whose daughter was in the other van. And I got to be honest, up until that point, like I probably was like the biggest culprit of bringing the race on between two church vans. I was probably the one who like created that the most time. And all of a sudden, when this parent came to me and kind of laid it out for me, all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, I never saw this issue clearly. I never even thought about how stupid this was. And so sometimes You got to take the opportunity to be in their shoes. Number 7, look for lessons. Again, this goes back to what I said before. Don't take criticism personally, but take it seriously. There's always a lesson. Regardless of how negative the scenario may appear to you, there's always a hidden gift in the form of a lesson. Find it. Find it and tuck it away. John Maxwell, in his book, Failing Forward or Falling Forward, or one of those great books or titles, but he says, listen, if you fail and while you're down there, pick something up. If you're going to fall and mess up, at least get something out of it. At least learn something from it. So same thing in criticism. In the midst of criticism, learn something from it. Learn a lesson from it. Number 8, choose to eliminate negative people from your life. That does not mean kill. Just want to, I know that Joe and Simon are going to be like, there he goes again. Choose to eliminate them. Here's what you get to choose in your life. You get to choose who influences you. You don't get to choose whether you're influenced or not. You just get to choose who influences you. Because here's the reality. Every one of us are influenced, and you're influenced by whatever you look at, you're influenced by whatever you read, you're influenced by whoever you hang out with, period. You can't choose, oh, that person over there, I'm going to hang out with them all the time, but I'm not going to allow them to influence me. That's impossible. They're going to influence you in some way, shape, or form. Their presence, their personality, the way that they live their life, the way that they talk, it's going to have an influence on you. You don't get to choose whether you get influenced or not, but you do get to choose who influences you. And so when you find yourself in situations where you're dealing with criticism and you're trying to overcome it, don't hang out with people that are hyper-reactive to criticism and that are always ready to, fire the gun at the other person, because that's just going to make you the same way. And so I've had to learn, like in certain situations, I've had to say to myself, I really need to talk to someone. I need to process this with somebody. And you kind of got like all your names in the phone and people that are mentors in my life and everything. Nope, don't want to call them, because I know if I call them, it's just going to be worse. I'm not going to feel any better. I'm actually going to be worse. Oh yeah, let me talk to this person, because this person always calms me. This person always gives me another perspective. This person always helps me be introspective about this situation and help me see it from all perspectives. So choose to eliminate the negative people from your life. Number 9, become the observer. Become the observer. When you are finding yourself in a situation, you're sitting in a meeting somewhere and there's some heated discussion going on, or you're the target of the discussion, sometimes you just kind of have to like sit back and you kind of have to like detach yourself emotionally from it and just observe and watch what's happening and watch the dynamics and see what's going on in the situation and get some perspective. Get perspective from the other people in the room, and then sometimes you got to get perspective from other people. So I'll give you a real recent example. I sat in a meeting today that was one of those hard hat, glad tidings, we call them, one of the hard hat meetings. And we were talking about the future of our church. We were talking about service schedule stuff, and we were talking about some children's ministry stuff and some youth ministry stuff and programs and when they're offered and all this different stuff. And at the end of the day, there was a big disagreement between what I thought the next step for youth ministry should be and what the children's department thought the next step should be. We were completely on different perspectives. And when we ended the meeting, we were still on different perspectives. It just was one of those kinds of meetings, right? We're all still friends. We all still love each other, hang out, but it is what it is. And so I'm sitting in my office after the meeting today, this afternoon, before I drove up here, and I'm thinking to myself, what's the best thing that I should do right now? And I thought to myself, I need to really figure out why they're thinking the way they're thinking, because I just don't understand why their thought process is what it is. And so I just engaged in sending them an email saying, hey guys, let's talk about this. Here's some of my thoughts. I'm not sending this email because I'm trying to make a case or pick a fight, but here's my thoughts. Please respond with your thoughts, because I really want to understand why you guys think the way that you think. So sometimes you got to step away from the situation. Just say, I need to observe what's going on here. I got to find perspective in this situation. Number 10, real practical. Go for a run. Exercise. Do something to help take your mind off of it, right? Physical exercise can do wonders for your stress level. Wonders for your stress level. Number 11, find out what the worst case scenario is. Think about the worst case scenario. Ask yourself 2 questions. You can put these in your notes if they're not already in there. In this situation, dealing with a difficult person, criticism, if I do not respond, what's the worst thing that can happen from it? Ask yourself the opposite question. If I do respond, what's the worst thing that can result from it? Again, before you respond, just think through it. Do I need to respond to this? Is this just me? My dominant personality? Gotta win? Gotta argue? Gotta win the fight? What's the worst thing that can happen? What if I don't respond at all? What if I just say, I'm just going to take that one like a fighter, and it's good. I took the punch. It's all good. I'll absorb that and just keep on going on. Or on the flip side, what if I don't respond? What message am I sending if I don't respond to this? Maybe I need to respond. Number 12, almost done. Avoid heated discussions. We talked about that a lot. We've all been in them. We've all had them. We've all walked away from them and thought, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I lose my temper in that situation? I've just created more problems for myself, so on and so on. Learn to be calm in the situation. Learn to sit back. Learn to observe. If you can't have the discussion in that moment because you're too heated, learn to walk away and say any time to think, any time to process. Number 13, ask yourself what's most important. Ask yourself what's most important. It's a priority question again. It's me just saying, in this situation, what's the most important thing that needs to happen? Is it important that I'm right? Is it important that we have an agreement? Is it important that we agree to disagree? Is it important that I keep the relationship in the right perspective? What's the most important thing right now? Because criticism and emotional moments in our life make us think that what's happening right here, right now, is the most important thing in our life. And sometimes you just got to say, you know what? You know what's more important? What's more important? For me, in my stage of life right now, you know what's more important? What's more important is, hey, I got a job. I want to try to keep it. I get to go home. I got a wife. I got kids. Priority questions are huge. Number 14. This was kind of funny, but it has good meaning. Pour honey. Pour honey. Not poison. Not coals. Not flames. Treat the person with respect. You want to be the kind of leader who, even when someone is in your face being critical towards you, that you show them and treat them with great respect. You want to be the kind of leader that can walk away from the heated discussion where you were able to say, you know what, no matter what happened, I kept my cool, I kept my demeanor, I was polite, I was respectful, I kept my wherewithal. I poured honey into the situation and didn't make it worse and didn't pour fire and fuel and put it all together and just make the whole thing erupt because of my personality, because of the way that I handled that sort of situation. The Bible says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So the way that you would love to be treated in those situations, treat that other person that way, even if they're not giving it to you. You be in that situation what you wish that other person was being to you. And so if you're sitting there saying, man, I wish they were being polite about this. I wish they were being respectful. I wish they weren't yelling at me or talking to me with that tone of voice or choosing to belittle me. That's fine. You be that way to that person and you model for them in that situation the way that those kinds of moments can really be handled. Last one, number 15, express it. Express it. And then we talked about this one real briefly, but this is where sometimes you got to walk away from it and you just have to figure out, I got to put all my thoughts in paper, I got to put it in an email, I got to write it out, I got to think through it, I got to talk to my spouse, I have to work through this. Now, here's the mistakes that we make with this one, because this is where we usually say, I just need to vent about it. Don't vent. Don't erupt. Don't explode. Allow yourself to sit and have a conversation about it, because venting is just like pouring gasoline on. You're just making it worse and worse, and we're just getting yourself even more worked up. Well, I would have said this, and I'm going to say this, and you're not helping yourself. You're not helping anybody. Learn how to express it in a healthy way.